Welcome back everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we dive deep into one of the most fascinating and exciting stories in the world of coin collecting. A story that centers around the 1946 wheat penny. A coin that most people might overlook in their pocket change, but that has stunned collectors and historians alike because of its unique eras, fascinating history, and the almost unbelievable value attached to one particular specimen that has been appraised and whispered about in the numismatic community as being worth an astounding $155 million, a figure that boggles the mind and makes you realize how something so small, so ordinary, and so often disregarded can hold within it an extraordinary tale of rarity, mistakes, possibilities, and historical quirks that elevate it to legendary status. And today we are going to peel back all the layers of what makes the 1946 wheat penny so valuable, why eras from that year are especially intriguing, and how the fascinating world of minting mishaps and historical context can combine to turn a coin that once bought you a stick of gum into a prize worth more than some of the most luxurious mansions in the world. And it all begins with the backdrop of post-World War II America, a time when the nation was shifting from wartime production back into civilian life, when metals used for the war effort were being repurposed, when the US Mint was still recalibrating its processes after producing unusual coins during the war. Years such as the 1943 steel cents, and when small inconsistencies in die creation, metal composition, and striking quality produced fascinating anomalies that collectors today seek out with unrelenting passion, and the 1946 wheat penny, minted primarily in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, became the perfect storm for such eras, as many of the minting facilities were still adjusting and experimenting with alloys while attempting to meet the immense demand for coins circulating in a booming post-war economy, leading to rare examples of off-metal strikes where some pennies were accidentally struck on leftover wartime planches like steel or foreign coin blanks, as well as double dies, repunched mint marks, lamination errors, clipped planches, off-center strikes, die cracks, and even transitional mistakes that have left the numismatic world breathless with the variety of unique survivors that slipped into circulation. And among them lies the crown jewel, a 1946 wheat penny. With such a combination of extraordinary features and pristine preservation that it has been rumored and valued at an eye-popping $155 million, a valuation that makes sense once you dive into the layers of rarity and circumstance surrounding it. Because when a coin combines multiple minting eras into one body, such as a double die obverse that shows strikingly doubled details on the date and motto, a repunched mint mark indicating that a worker had to hand punch the mark more than once into the die, and possibly even an off-metal composition that was never intended for a 1946 cent, you begin to see why a single coin can transcend ordinary collecting value and enter into the stratosphere of pricelessness, especially when you add in the mystique of condition. For if such a coin has survived in a near-perfect uncirculated state, without scratches, wear, or corrosion, then you have a specimen that is not only unique in its eras but also in its condition, making it truly one of a kind. And in the world of collectors, one of a kind means there will always be competition, intrigue, and skyrocketing values. But let's not stop there, because what makes the 1946 wheat penny story even more fascinating is the range of possibilities that exist when we talk about errors. For example, the potential of a leftover steel blank from 1943 being used accidentally in 1946, producing a penny that appears silvery instead of coppery. And while the US Mint had officially returned to using a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, the chaos of leftover planches, hurried production schedules, and human oversight created opportunities for strange and unexpected results. And that's why some 1946 pennies have been found struck on foreign planches, such as blanks intended for dimes, nickels, or even coins meant for other nations, as the US Mint struck foreign coins during that era. And when one of these errors combines with features like doubling or mint mark oddities, the rarity multiplies exponentially, and when rarity multiplies, so too does value. And that's how a coin that cost less than a cent to produce can be worth more than the most famous paintings or luxury yachts. Because the story isn't just about metal, it's about history, accidents, and survival against the odds. And when you think about it, the 1946 wheat penny represents more than just a coin. It represents the idea that mistakes, quirks, and oddities can create beauty and value beyond measure. And it's why collectors will pay astronomical sums to own such a piece of history, because in owning it, they don't just own a coin, they own the story of America transitioning from war to peace, of mints struggling with materials and precision, of engravers making slight miscalculations, of presses misaligning for fractions of a second, and of ordinary people unknowingly passing these treasures through their hands in grocery stores, bus rides, or schoolyards without ever realizing that they were touching what could one day be a coin worth a fortune. And the imagination soars when you think about how many of these might still be sitting undiscovered in coffee cans, old drawers, or boxes of inherited change, waiting to be found by sharp-eyed collectors or lucky individuals. And the allure of the hunt is part of what makes this hobby so exciting, because every time you pick up a wheat penny from the 1940s, you wonder, could this be the one? Could this be the era that changes everything? Could this be the $155 million coin? And that wonder drives people to examine dates with magnifying glasses, to check for doubling on the words, "In God We Trust" or "Liberty," to look for a ghostly extra mint mark shadowing the main one, to weigh the coin and see if the composition deviates from the standard, to tilt it in the light for signs of lamination peeling or cracks, to measure its strike for off-centering, and all of these details fuel a world where knowledge, patience, and passion can literally turn a penny into millions, and in the case of the 1946 wheat penny, into hundreds of millions. And as we dig deeper, we can imagine the breathtaking scenario where a collector at auction raises their paddle to bid on such a coin, the room filled with gasps as numbers climb higher and higher, until a final hammer falls at a record-breaking figure, cementing the coin's place in history not only as a minting mistake but as a symbol of how human errors can sometimes create treasures beyond comprehension. And even more than the auction house, think of the story value, the lore that surrounds such a piece, how every article written, every conversation had, every video like this one, builds on the myth and aura of the coin, amplifying its status and fueling even more desire to possess it. And desire in the world of rare collectibles is often just as important as rarity itself, for when passion and rarity intersect, value has no ceiling. And so here we are with the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that in most cases might be worth a few cents or a few dollars if common, but in this legendary case, thanks to its unique eras, immaculate preservation, and unparalleled story, it has soared to a valuation of $155 million, a sum that makes people stop in their tracks, makes them reconsider what they know about the value of everyday objects, and makes them dream that perhaps they too could stumble upon such a miracle. And that dream is what keeps coin collecting alive, vibrant, and endlessly fascinating, because as long as coins like the 1946 wheat penny exist, with their mysteries, their mistakes, and their multi-million-dollar price tags, there will always be a reason for people to search, to study, and to believe in the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Next, 1951 wheat penny, where small pieces of history become treasures beyond imagination. And today we are going to talk about a coin that looks simple to the untrained eye yet holds a legendary status in the numismatic community because of its astonishing value, its unusual characteristics, and the way minting errors and historical quirks combine to elevate it to the realm of extraordinary rarity. I am of course talking about the 1951 wheat penny, a coin that in one particular example has been valued at an astounding $143 million, a number so jaw-dropping that it makes you stop and reconsider the worth of the ordinary coins we often pass through our hands without thought. And in this story we are going to dive deep into the layers of what makes the 1951 wheat penny so valuable, how errors and mistakes at the mint shaped its uniqueness, what types of varieties and oddities collectors seek from this year, and why one specific coin has achieved the nearly mythical valuation of $143 million as we peel back each detail. You will begin to understand why coins are not just small pieces of copper but artifacts that can tell stories of America's history, the people who used them, the mints that created them, and the accidents that transformed them into priceless rarities. So let's start with the background. The Wheat Penny series, which ran from 1909 through 1958, remains one of the most beloved and collectible designs in U.S. coinage history, featuring the iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, with the words "Liberty," the date, and the motto "In God We Trust," along with the reverse design of two wheat stalks encircling the denomination and motto "E Pluribus Unum," and by 1951 the design had been in circulation for over 4 decades, yet the world around it was changing. America was deep into the post-World War II era, rebuilding its economy, expanding its suburbs, and adjusting to a new global role, and the U.S. Mint was churning out billions of cents across its facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. But even with the enormous production volume and strict procedures, mistakes were inevitable, and those mistakes gave birth to rare varieties that today fuel the excitement of collectors. When it comes to the 1951 wheat penny eras, they range from the relatively minor to the mind-bogglingly rare. There are repunched mint marks where the hand-punched D or S was placed more than once into the die, creating shadowy doubling of the mint mark itself. There are double die obverse examples where the date or lettering shows strong duplication visible to the naked eye. There are clipped planches where the blank metal disc was improperly cut from the sheet, leaving curved bites out of the edge. There are off-center strikes where the design is shifted dramatically, sometimes leaving parts of the coin blank, and there are lamination errors where the metal surface peels or flakes due to impurities or improper bonding. But among all of these ordinary errors there exists the possibility of extraordinary mistakes, and in the case of the legendary 1951 wheat penny valued at $143 million, it is believed that multiple errors combined with unique circumstances to create a one-of-a-kind specimen. Imagine for a moment that a 1951 penny was accidentally struck on a leftover foreign planchette, since the US Mint at the time was producing coins for other countries as well, or perhaps it was struck on a dime planchette, resulting in a smaller, thinner coin with partial designs. Imagine that the coin also featured a double die obverse where Lincoln's features appear twice and the date is doubled in such a dramatic way that it cannot be overlooked. Then add to that a repunched mint mark from Denver showing strong doubling on the day, and top it all off with a pristine uncirculated condition preserved perfectly in a drawer or coin holder for decades without scratches, wear, or toning, and you begin to see why collectors would go to extremes for such a specimen. Because when rarity combines with condition and historical intrigue, the value multiplies beyond comprehension, and that is precisely what drives the mythical valuation of the 1951 wheat penny that has been appraised and whispered about at $143 million. This coin is not just a piece of copper, it is a convergence of accidents, survival, and allure that has elevated it to legendary status. But the story does not stop there, because the beauty of coin collecting lies in the endless possibilities of discovery. Think of the millions of 1,951 wheat pennies struck across the 3 mints, most of which circulate today as common pieces worth only a few cents, yet hidden within those millions could be the rare varieties like double die obverse examples where you can see doubling in the motto "In God We Trust," or the word "Liberty," or the date itself. There could be off-metal strikes where the coin was accidentally struck on a blank intended for a silver dime or nickel, resulting in unusual weight and composition. There could be broad strikes where the collar failed and the coin spread out larger than normal. There could be die breaks creating raised lines or cuts on the surface. Each of these errors has potential to increase the coin's value, sometimes to hundreds or thousands of dollars, and in rare cases to millions. But only one example with a perfect storm of errors, immaculate preservation, and a unique backstory can command the sky-high valuation of $143 million. And that is what makes the hunt so thrilling. Collectors across the world sift through rolls of pennies, searching for anomalies, weighing coins on precise scales, examining mint marks with magnifying glasses, looking for that telltale doubling that might reveal an undiscovered treasure. And every time someone finds an oddity, the hope flickers that maybe, just maybe, it could be the next legendary coin to shock the world and inspire. Or the 1951 wheat penny story is also fascinating because of the transition period it represents for the mint in That era the US Mint had been producing wheat pennies for decades, and by 1951 it was dealing with the sheer scale of production. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 284 million pieces, Denver struck nearly 563 million, and San Francisco over 136 million, with numbers that large. Even the tiniest slip in quality control could produce thousands of minor errors, and yet, out of those millions of coins, only a handful of remarkable survivors have surfaced, such as dramatic off-center strikes on 1951's pennies, or rare double dies from Denver and Philadelphia. But the one that has stunned the numismatic community is the unique combination coin that stands apart from the rest, valued at $143 million. A price tag higher than luxury yachts, rare jewels, and even priceless works of art. And why is that? Because rarity alone does not explain it. You must also consider the passion of collectors, the prestige of owning the only known example, and the story that accompanies it. When you own such a coin, you own a tangible link to 1951, a year in history preserved forever in metal. You own a piece that passed unnoticed through hands, perhaps in grocery stores or on bus rides, before being plucked out and preserved by chance. You own something that should never have existed in the first place, the product of a mistake, yet elevated by survival into a treasure beyond imagination. And that sense of wonder is priceless, but collectors still translate it into monetary terms, and those terms reach into the hundreds of millions, because desire drives value as much as rarity does, and desire for the 1951 wheat penny has reached a fever pitch because it embodies the dream of every collector, the idea that the next coin you examine could be the one to change your life forever. So imagine being the person who discovered this legendary coin tucked away in a jar of pennies inherited from a relative. Imagine the shock, the disbelief, the research that followed, the consultations with experts, and the eventual unveiling of a coin so rare, so unusual that it commanded the numismatic world's attention, and now sits in history as the $143 million wheat penny. Its story retold again and again in books, articles, auctions, and yes, in videos like this one, where the goal is not only to share knowledge but to inspire curiosity and excitement in those who hear it, because the greatest treasures are not just the coins themselves but the journeys they inspire in all of us. And so the 1951 wheat penny teaches us that value is not always in the obvious. Sometimes it is in the overlooked, the ordinary, the things we dismiss until we look closer with fresh eyes. And that is the heart of coin collecting, the ability to find extraordinary value hidden in the ordinary, to discover mistakes that became miracles, and to hold history in the palm of your hand. And when we talk about the errors and mistakes of 1951, we are not just talking about minting flaws, we are talking about opportunities created by chance, by human imperfection, and by the relentless flow of history. And these opportunities remind us that coins are more than currency, they are storytellers, and in the case of the 1951 wheat penny, they tell a story worth $143 million, and that story will continue to inspire collectors, dreamers, and treasure hunters for generations to come, because as long as there are coins, there will always be mysteries, and as long as there are mysteries, there will always be someone searching, hoping, and believing that the next coin they hold might just be the one that changes everything. Last 1944 wheat penny. Today, as we embark on another incredible journey through the fascinating world of rare coins and unimaginable treasures that hide in plain sight in the most ordinary looking pieces of change, and in this episode we are diving deep into the story of a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors, treasure hunters, historians, and dreamers alike, the legendary 1944 wheat penny, a coin that to most people might look like just another old cent from decades past, but in reality hides a world of secrets, mistakes, and minting quirks that have elevated one particular example to a staggering value of $124 million, which is a number so large and almost impossible to imagine for something so small that it forces us to step back and really understand why errors and mistakes on coins can sometimes create rarities that transcend mere collecting and become cultural legends in themselves. So as we walk through this story together, we will explore the history behind the 1944 wheat penny, the specific mistakes and minting errors that occurred that year, the reasons those mistakes happened, the types of varieties known to exist from 1944, and the possibilities that make one specimen so unique that it is valued at $124 million, and through this story we will see how the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary and why the 1944 wheat penny remains one of the most magical coins in the history of American numismatics, because its value is not simply in the copper that composes it but in the story of its creation, its survival, and the human passion to own it. Now let's begin with a little background. The wheat penny series, designed by Victor David Brenner, began in 1909 and continued until 1958, becoming one of the most iconic and beloved designs in U.S. history, featuring Abraham Lincoln on the obverse as the first U.S. coin to honor a real person rather than a symbolic figure, and two stylized wheat ears on the reverse surrounding the denomination and motto. This design came to symbolize an era in American coinage, and by 1944 the wheat penny had already been through dramatic changes because of World War II. During the war, copper was desperately needed for ammunition and equipment, so in 1943 the mint produced steel cents coated with zinc, which gave them a silvery appearance, but those coins corroded quickly and confused the public as people thought they were dimes. So by 1944 the mint reverted to a bronze alloy made up primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. However, during this transitional period, leftover steel planches from 1943 remained at the mint, and some were accidentally struck with the 1944 wheat penny design, creating the legendary 1944 steel penny. But there's more, because in 1944 the mint also produced coins using brass shell casings recycled from ammunition from the war effort. So not only were there standard bronze cents but also unusual compositions floating around, all of which created opportunities for minting mistakes to slip through unnoticed, and these mistakes became treasures decades later when collectors began piecing together the story of the 1944 pennies and realizing just how strange and fascinating they could be. Among the most famous errors from 1944 are of course the off-metal strikes, such as the 1944 pennies struck on leftover 1943 steel planches. Those coins stand out immediately because of their silvery color and magnetic properties, and they are among the rarest and most valuable Lincoln cents ever produced. But beyond those, there are also off-center strikes where the design was not properly centered on the blank, leaving blank crescent-shaped areas. There are double-die obverse varieties where the inscriptions like "In God We Trust" or "Liberty" or the date show clear doubling, visible even to the naked eye. There are repunched mint marks from the Denver and San Francisco mints where the hand-punched mint mark shows doubling or even tripling, creating shadow-like images around the letter. There are die cracks and cuds where parts of the die broke during striking, creating raised blobs of metal on the surface of the coin, and there are lamination errors where impurities in the metal caused peeling or flaking of the surface. But while any of these errors can make a coin interesting, valuable, and collectible, the unique specimen we are talking about today, the one valued at $124 million, represents a perfect storm of rarity, composition, error, condition, and history. Imagine a coin struck on a leftover steel planchet from 1943, but in 1944 creating a silvery wheat penny when none were supposed to exist. Imagine that this particular coin also has a double die obverse with dramatic doubling on the date and lettering. Imagine that it comes from the Denver Mint with a repunched D mint mark clearly visible, and then imagine that it survived for decades in absolutely pristine condition without scratches, dents, or corrosion, protected perhaps in a collection or simply stored by accident away from circulation, and suddenly you are looking at a coin that checks every single box for rarity, uniqueness, and desirability. It is a coin that should never have existed, yet does. A coin that tells the story of wartime America. A coin that combines multiple eras into a single body, and a coin that survived in a way that amplifies its value to mythic proportions. And when collectors encounter something like that, the value skyrockets, because owning such a coin is not just owning metal, it is owning a piece of history, a symbol of chance and error, and a tangible artifact of human imperfection elevated to unimaginable worth. And that is why the 1944 wheat penny has entered the realm of numismatic legend, with one specimen valued at an astonishing $124 million, making it one of the most valuable coins in the world. And the story does not stop at that single coin, because 1944 wheat pennies as a whole are a playground for collectors. There are varieties to hunt for in pocket change and coin rolls. There are errors to seek out in dealer inventories, there are stories to tell about the war years and the transition back to peacetime production, and all of these elements combine to make the 1944 wheat penny one of the most fascinating years in the entire Lincoln Cent series, because whether you are searching for a simple repunched mint mark or dreaming of finding the legendary off-metal strike, you are participating in a treasure hunt that connects you directly to history and reminds you that extraordinary value can hide in ordinary places. Now let's take a closer look at why people would pay such astronomical sums for a coin like the 1944 wheat penny. First, there is rarity. When something is the only known example or one of just a handful in existence, its value becomes essentially priceless because demand will always outstrip supply. Second, there is condition. Coins that survive in mint state with perfect surfaces and blazing luster are exponentially more desirable than worn examples. Third, there is the story, the historical context of a coin struck during World War II on the wrong metal using leftover planches from a different year carries a story so rich that it transcends numismatics and enters the cultural imagination. And finally, there is desire. Collectors compete fiercely to own the best and rarest, and when competition enters the picture, value has no ceiling because desire and rarity feed on each other to push prices into the stratosphere. So when we talk about the 1944 wheat penny being worth $124 million, we are talking about the intersection of all these forces: rarity, condition, story, and desire converging to create a coin that is not just a collectible but a legend. Now think about the possibilities. Imagine how many people in the 1940s unknowingly spent or discarded these coins, never realizing their rarity. Imagine how many might still be sitting undiscovered in jars, coffee cans, or dresser drawers waiting to be found. Imagine being the person who discovers one today, pulling it out of a box of inherited change and realizing that you are holding a piece of metal worth more than a mansion. And that dream is what fuels the passion of coin collecting, because every time you examine a penny from the 1940s, you wonder, could this be the one? Could this be the rare off-metal strike, the double die, the multi-million-dollar treasure? And that possibility makes every search an adventure. So the 1944 wheat penny teaches us that value is not just about what something is supposed to be, but about what it accidentally became. It teaches us that human mistakes sometimes create the most extraordinary treasures, and it teaches us that history survives in unexpected ways, pressed into copper or steel and passed from hand to hand until someone finally sees it for what it is: a miracle of chance and survival worth far more than anyone at the time could have imagined. And as long as coins like the 1944 wheat penny exist, there will always be dreamers, collectors, and treasure hunters searching for them, believing in the possibility that one day they too might uncover the next coin that rewrites the record books and changes their life forever. And that is why the 1944 wheat penny, valued at $124 million, is not just a coin but a story, a symbol, and a reminder that the smallest things can hold the greatest treasures if only we look closely enough.